Hello students, welcome to Rao's IAS Focus Weekly. Today on 27th of March 2025, we'll be talking about the recent development in the subject of science and technology of the past 1 week. So I have covered the topics from the 20th of March 2025 till 26th of March 2025. Now these are the 5 topics that I found to be important for this week. Let's see the topics. So first topic I'm going to discuss is AI Appu app. This is basically an innovative from a private startup based in Bangalore, but it becomes relevant to us in terms of the scope of artificial intelligence. UPSC may not directly ask this question, but in terms of applications of AI, it can be an important point. Then we'll talk about the Governments of India initiative of eradicating TB by 2025. It is 5 years early than the objective set by WHO. Then we'll talk about the recent INS Tavasya. It is a stealth frigate co-developed or jointly developed with Russia under a technology transfer agreement. So we'll talk about this as well as the joint collaboration with Russia. Then we'll talk about some recent developments in GM crops. Typically, you already might be knowing on 15th of April, we may see a verdict of Supreme Court on GM mustard. But before that itself, GM rubber is also another crop which has been recommended by various organizations to be implemented in rubber producing states of the country. We'll talk about what has been the development in the area of GM rubber and what is the current demand. Right, this is what we'll talk about. And then lastly, we'll talk about the recent news of using sonic weapons in Serbia for crowd control. What exactly is the sonic weapon and how it basically functions. So we'll talk about this part. Let's start with the first topic. The first topic of discussion is AI Appu. Like I already said, this is basically an innovation from an Indian startup. So UPSC may not directly ask this question, but this becomes very relevant from the context of applications of artificial intelligence in the subject of civil services, right? So let's start. So this is basically an AI platform designed for especially for young children age 3 to 6 years. Remember guys, by 6 years of age, nearly 85% of the brain development already occurs. So it's important that you introduce more skill sets, more ideas of literacy by this age, so that it becomes more impactful in the overall growth of the child. So this has been developed by a Bangalore-based startup, a Bangalore-based non-for-profit startup called Rocket Learning. It's basically an adaptive learning platform where the AI system learns by conversing with the child, understanding the overall growth of the child, overall development of the child, and overall weaknesses, and uses innovative ways of storytelling by using some examples, by using words, by using vocabulary which can help the child learn. Then it uses interactive dialogues to teach concepts which are related to pre-literacy, numeracy, and even socio-emotional skills. Then the main objective of this initiative is to gap the early childhood education in India, especially among the underprivileged society of the country. Remember, this is an important application of overall science and technology, that we can use science in order to bridge the gaps of education and other services as well to the underprivileged, right? And like I said, approximately 85% of brain development occurs by the age of 6. So it is important to make early educational interventions that can both be impactful as well as time sensitive. I hope you understand this. There is nothing much to talk about on this particular platform, but remember, the main objective of this initiative is to see applications and the wider platform that artificial intelligence can touch. I also talked about AI. I have also written about AI Vayu, which is again an initiative from Tata Consultancy Services. UPSC may not directly ask, but it is also a kind of an AI platform developed by TCS, which also is based in order to become a platform like ChatGPT that can help employees as well as the users of the various services. Now this is the first real topic for today. Now this is related to the recent news that Government of India has successfully, basically Department of Biotechnology has successfully completed sequencing of 10,000 TB genome samples, right? The overall objective is to collect the genome samples of 32,500, right? That was the overall objective, but we have already completed 10,000 of the TB genome samples, right? Now, why it is important? What is the entire concept? So we'll start with the first step here. The Government of India in 2018, Prime Minister Narendra Modi introduced a vision of finding or they took an ambition in 2018 to eradicate TB from the country by 2025. By this year end, we have an objective of eradicating TB. Now remember, India till 2024 have registered maximum number of cases in the world. Approximately 28% of the global TB cases comes from India. Right? You all know TB is basically a bacterial disease. It's caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and it's a bacterial disease that can affect any part of the body. Remember, it's a bacterial infection that can affect any part of the body, although more than 80% of the cases, it is the TB of lungs. So TB of lungs is the most common type of TB, but TB can affect any other part of the body as well. And you all understand it's a highly infectious disease, because if it is a lung based, if it is an infection in the lungs, it can be transmitted. It is contagious from one person to other. It can easily travel. So it also becomes a highly infectious disease, right? UPSC have previously asked a question regarding the infectious level of HIV and TB, comparing the two types of diseases, right? Now, WHO has taken an initiative of eradicating TB by 2030, but Government of India took a further more ambitious initiative of eradicating it by 2025. Now, what are we doing in order to find a solution and eradicating it? So guys, Government of India launched a program called Dare2eraD. Dare2eraD is a program, Dare2eraD TB. It was launched by Department of Biotechnology. The objective of Dare2eraD TB is basically to collect and sequence 32,200 strains of Mycobacterium tuberculosis patients, of active patients. With this, now you can understand, I've talked about this also previously in the previous discussions also we have talked about it, that when you have the genome sequence of multiple patients, it becomes somewhat easy for us to identify a specific genetic diversity of the TB patients with that of non-TB patients. It also helps us in finding personalized drugs. And guys, you may already be knowing that TB patients have a higher tendency to develop drug resistance in later stages. You might already be knowing that TB is divided into multiple types of drug resilient variants. Like we have something called MDR TB, multi-drug resistant TB. So when a person is already infected with TB, and if he has not taken the medicines properly, or if the TB have relapsed, then when the TB relapses, the bacteria that was causing the TB infection, it often show immunity against the first line of therapy that is given under the TB cases. So those kind of TBs are called multi-drug resistant TB. Now, such multi-drug resistant TB requires a second line of therapy or second line of drugs, which basically are different from the first line of drugs, and they are supposed to be more potent against a complex TB form. If a person is further diagnosed with a relapse of TB later on, it becomes extremely drug resilient TB, where there are less number of drugs available in the market which can be effective in those cases. And that makes TB even more life-threatening. And once a person is diagnosed, even after that, it can turn out to be total drug resistant, where there is no drug that can really function to kill or terminate that TB infection. So I hope you understand. So it becomes very important in order to find a Mycobacterium tuberculosis strain, that how the strain also evolves against various drug therapies, and that is important to know in order to find a permanent cure. So you can understand that as we are infected with TB, the mutation occurs in the bacteria itself that makes it more resilient to TB based drugs. So the objective is to sequence 32,200 strains of Mycobacterium tuberculosis from active TB patients. Second is to create a centralized biorepository of clinical Mycobacterium tuberculosis strains in the country, in India, to map the genetic diversity of TB isolates and isolate and their treatment outcomes, and then associate mutations in the Mycobacterium tuberculosis with drug resistance patterns. This is very important because this is one of the major cases. India also ranks 1 in drug resistant TB as well. And then to assess household transmission dynamics of TB. These are the objectives of the Dare2eraD TB program. So I hope all of you understood this part, and the objective is to collect these many samples the objective was to collect these many samples to find a cure or eliminate TB by 2025. And remember, we have recently committed that these samples would be collected by November 2025. So by November 2025, we are expecting that we should be able to collect these many samples of TB, and we would go one step closer in finding a way to eliminate TB. Remember, this Dare2eraD initiative has been launched by Department of Biotechnology, right? Remember this, UPSC can ask these kind of questions. I hope all of you guys are able to understand. This is what we have under finding a solution to TB. Then guys, the next news that was there, it was INS Tavasya. INS Tavasya, let me tell you first, it has been a recent induction of a indigenous stealth frigate. It is not mentioned here. Yes, it is mentioned here. It is an indigenous stealth frigate. Now, in India, we already had this class of frigates in the service of Indian Navy. We call it Talwar class, but it is technically a Russian origin class called Krivak. So it's actually a Krivak class stealth frigates. Stealth, you understand, stealth basically involves those technologies or those technological innovations which makes your military hardware, you know, somewhat hidden to any kind of surveillance technology. So if you create a technique which makes you hidden from radar, it becomes stealth. If you create a technology which makes you hidden from enemy sonar, it becomes stealth. So stealth is basically those set of technologies. Normally, I discuss stealth extensively in the class. I normally tell students that stealth basically is a technique of using different kinds of materials, different kinds of, you know, shapes, designs, and on top of that, dampening of any kind of unnecessary noises, which makes you invisible to any kind of surveillance technique. So INS Tavasya is a recent induction. This is actually the fourth induction under a project called Project 1135.6. This project 113.56 is a project to induct this project. Okay, let me talk about this. In 2016, India and Russia signed a defense cooperation agreement. Under with this agreement, India accepted to procure 4 Krivak class frigates, which are called Talwar class in India. And under these 4 Krivak class, 2 of them were supposed to be built in Russia and rest 2 were supposed to be built in India. Right? Now, what is so special? What is the speciality of the Krivak class frigates? They are basically designed for multi-role operations. Remember, frigates are not the biggest of the ships. They are meant for multi-role operations only. They have a limited blue water capacity. That means they can't go to any place on earth or any place in the blue waters or high seas, but they can go to a significant distance, and they are meant to perform multiple operations like naval warfare. They can be used in war, and they can also help in surface and subsurface operations as well. So multi-role operations, that is what the Krivak class can do. These are warships that feature stealth capabilities, new weapons, sensors, and platform management systems. These are the speciality of the Krivak class. Now, under the project 1135.6, the 4 Krivak class stealth frigates are the Russian mates. 2 of them are there. Russia has already delivered one of them. That is INS Tushil. It was the first one. It was commissioned in the Indian Navy in 2024. INS Tamal is the second one, which is expected to be commissioned this year. Out of the Indian made, we have already provided both of them. INS Triput, which was launched in 2024, and INS Tavasya, which has been launched recently in 2025. So this year could be the year when project 1135.6 is going to culminate. Remember, UPSC can ask these kind of terms, 1135, and sometimes UPSC can ask things related to frigates as well. I hope all of you guys are able to understand. We have already previously talked about INS Shivalik. We have talked about INS Brahmaputra. We have talked about, you know, different types of frigates that are there already. Most of the frigates that are indigenously made, they are named after mountain ranges. They are named after rivers. I hope all of you understand. Then guys, comes the next topic of discussion, that is related to GM rubber. Now, this is again an interesting topic to discuss because the story of GM rubber is not very old. So genetically modified crops, all of you know that there is now much broader acceptance to genetically modified crops. We already know that GM genetically modified cotton, or what is famously called BT cotton, has been a really successful, breed of plants that has been introduced in India. It has made India one of the highest cotton producers. Before 2004, before the time when this BT cotton was introduced, India being the first user of cotton, still was not included in the top 5 cotton producers. But because of BT cotton, India has been successfully able to, register the top 3 cotton producing countries of the world. Now, another cash crop which is very, very popular is rubber. And India is not a large scale producer of rubber, but we produce rubber. We have 3-4 states in India that are producing rubber. One of them is Kerala, Karnataka, some small part of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu produces more rubber than Karnataka, remember that. So, and also in the northeastern states, we have Tripura, which produces rubber, a small part of Meghalaya, and also a certain part of Assam. All these states are producing rubber. So when it comes to rubber plantation, we have a consortium. We have got a national consortium of regional federations of rubber producer society. It is simply a society registered under the Societies Act, and they have been promoting the idea of using GM rubber plants since 2021. Since 2021, they have been pushing the various state governments to take a stand and introduce GM rubber, right? Now, what is fascinating to see here is that GM rubber has already been introduced on experimental basis. Remember, only on experimental basis, the state government of Assam, the state government of Tripura has already introduced GM rubber. Assam was the first state to introduce GM rubber in 2021. Tripura was able to introduce in 2024. Remember that. If you are appearing for state government exams, it is important information. So guys, remember, the world's first genetically modified rubber plant was developed by the Rubber Research Institute. It is based in Kerala, guys. It is based in Kerala, and this is under the Rubber Society, guys. And this institution made the world's first GM rubber, and this rubber was planted on experimental basis in Assam in 2021. Remember this. Now guys, under the government of India, in fact, Ministry of Commerce had introduced the National Rubber Policy in March 2019, which also had this objective of introducing novel methods of increasing the production of rubber plantation. Guys, we already know that Brazil has already been facing a decline in rubber production. One of the major reason is fungal infections. There has been a fungus which has started infecting the rubber plants in Brazil that has significantly reduced the production of rubber. And we all understand rubber is an important product used in possibly every appliance around us. There's all cars, rubber tires are used. There are so many fabrics, there are so many clothing, there are so many different kinds of goods that we are using which uses some kind of rubber alternative, right, or rubber substitute. So it's important that rubber production should be increased. And considering climate change, which may introduce novel types of vectors, novel types of fungi, novel types of organism may become more and more potent during this due to climate change. It becomes more important that we find novel solutions to keep producing high quality rubber. So the GM rubber that has been developed, it is basically developed with the gene MNSOD, or manganese containing superoxide dimutase. It's a gene that is inserted in the plants, which is expected to tide over severe cold conditions also. So even in the case of severe cold conditions, which normally natural rubber cannot sustain, it can help the plants to sustain. These plants are found to be more resilient to diseases and also changes in the climate, right? And further, it can also help in improving production of rubber overall. So this is an essential part of innovation and use of biotechnology in another GM crop. Remember, the introduction of GM rubber is a cash crop. It's a cash crop. So introduction of GM rubber can easily be accepted in the same way how BT cotton has been accepted by largely all the farmers in the country. I believe all of you guys are able to understand, and this is the fact. Although, remember, the union government has also given a verdict on this, that state governments have the discretion to decide if they want to introduce GM rubber in their own country, in their own state, right? So the state of Kerala till 2021 have been have not accepted the trials of GM rubber in their state, although the state of Assam and Tripura have allowed it for experimental purposes. Please do write this particular information. And now moving on to the last topic of discussion, that is related to sonic weapon. Now, what is the meaning of the word sonic and sonic boom, sonic bomb, sonic weapon? Guys, let me tell you one thing first straight. When it comes to sonic boom is basically the concept behind sonic bomb, sonic boom. So basically what happens, we know that there is a certain speed with which sound travels. Sound travels with a speed of 332 meters per second at 0 degrees Celsius. So if there is an object that can move faster than the speed of sound, then such an object can create a massive cracking sound that's called a sonic boom. So all of you must have heard that whenever any spectator go to watch the aerobatics performed by the Indian Air Force or Air Force of any country, if you go visit the aerobatics of visit and see the aerobatics of Aero India Expo that is organized in Bangalore every 2 years. This year also we had the Aero India Expo in the month of February. You will notice a lot of spectators who watch it live, they are normally asked to cover their ears. The reason for that is because when a fighter aircraft is about to cross the speed of sound, it often creates a massive cracking sound in the air, which can severely damage your ears, right? So those are called sonic boom. Now, based on the idea of sonic boom, there is a development of sonic weapons or sonic bombs, which are also known as sonic cannons or long range acoustic devices. Now, what is interesting to see here, these are not meant for attacking. They are not attack weapons, guys. They are basically crowd controlled weapons. They are used for controlling the crowd. Like you must have heard of tear gas, rubber pellets. You have heard of different things that are used, tasers. They are often used in order to control the crowd. Sonic bombs are also used for crowd control only, right? But what is interesting about these, sonic bombs can be fired from a somewhat farther distance compared to tasers and other kinds of rubber pellets and such. And what is interesting is you can specifically target a location when it comes to sonic weapons, right? There have been some news in Serbia. In Serbia, there was a certain protest where it was rumored. Basically, it was although the Serbian government, denied all the charges, but the local protesters have said that they have used sonic weapons against protesters to basically disperse the crowd, right? Even in India, there have been some news regarding sonic booms created by fighter aircraft, which cause a lot of disturbance, right? So basically, the idea is a sonic cannon or long range acoustic devices, they emit targeted beams of intense sound. These intense sounds are basically extremely loud sounds that can disorient and incapacitate individuals for a short period. So it is not meant to kill an individual, but it basically orients an individual. Normally the sound can go up to 160 decibels. 160 decibels is an extremely noisy sound. Remember, decibels is the unit of noise. Normally the human ear has a range of noise from 0 to 120 decibels, right? And it is basically a logarithmic value. So 10, if you go from 0 to 10, it is a 10 times escalation in the sound. If you go from 10 to 20, it becomes 100 times louder sound, right? Compared to 0, right? Or compared to 10, it is 10 times louder. 30 decibel is 10 times louder than 20 decibels. So likewise it goes. So this is somewhat a very extremely loud sound, 160 decibels. So here they identify, so what is basically the debate is that sometimes these crowd control weapons are deliberately used, or sometimes they could be accidental. Like accidental sonic booms are created when there is a aerobatic exercise going on, and during that aerobatic exercise a massive sonic boom may be created, which can also cause impact similar to a sonic weapon. But sometimes if these weapons are deliberately deployed for crowd control, this is something that is where long range acoustic devices and sonic cannons are used. I have one image here right? So this is how the sonic cannons often appear, right? And the sonic cannons are basically targeted to a certain crowd, right? So sonic devices, they can deliver a directional, beam of acoustic energy, meaning they have a potential to target specific areas and even individuals within a crowd, right? So it can disorient specific individuals in the crowd. And second is high decibel levels are produced, sometimes exceeding 160 decibels of sound, and can lead to ear pain, temporary deafness, and even long-term hearing impairment. So these are the kinds of impact that a sonic bomb can deliver. I hope all of you understand. So what kind of questions UPSC can ask in this case? They can ask questions not related to sonic bomb particularly, but they can relate it to unconventional weapon systems. They can relate it to, sonic boom, and they can also sometimes relate it to the simple idea of noise pollution, right? So you can expect, questions like this in the UPSC prelims. So guys, this concludes my discussion for today's Focus Weekly. I'll be seeing you guys next week. So all the best.